Your failures, Mr. Secretary, since you've taken office has been staggering. You sent classified operational information over Signal to chest thump in front of your wife, who, by the way, has no security clearance, risking service member lives in the process. You blew the $1 billion fight against the Houthis, whom, again, as my colleague says, has no Navy, and yet you lost all of those aircraft. You've created such a hostile command environment that no one wants to serve as your chief of staff or work with you in other senior DoD leadership roles. But what we should all be talking about more than all of this is that you have an unjustified, un-American misuse of the military in American cities, pulling resources and attention away from core missions to the detriment of the country, the war fighters, and yes, the war fighting that you claim to love. I don't know if this is because you are too inexperienced and incompetent to understand the real threats facing our country, or if it's because you are just an unqualified yes man who can't tell the president how to keep Americans safe. You are focusing on renaming basis for Confederate generals. You said just now to Senator King that to a man and to a woman, we would rather be associated with the old Confederate names. Well, I am one of those women. I served at Fort Rucker, Alabama, a base that was named for a traitor who took arms against the United States of America, led troops who killed Americans. It was renamed for Mike Novosel, a Medal of Honor recipient, who in his citation for the Medal of Honor includes that he saved 29 American lives, to include hovering backwards in a helicopter towards an enemy bunker where a wounded American was laying and saved that person, including after being taken fire himself. I know a little something about what it takes to fly a helicopter when you've been hit by enemy fire. That was heroic. I'd rather be associated with Mike Novosel than a failed Confederate traitor. I don't know whether you are inexperienced or too incompetent, but I wonder when you will actually focus on our nation's warfighting mission. We know that California is just a deliberate, systematic, political, and dangerous campaign led by you. We should not be using our military to play cops against Americans. General Kane, as chairman, a key part of your job is to coordinate military planning across the joint force. Is the department currently incorporating into any military plans expanding the use of the reserve forces to include the National Guard or active duty troops to support domestic law enforcement, including in other locations in the United States?
Senator, you know, we carefully.
No, General.
Well, it's not really a yes or no question, Madam Senator. We plan all kinds of different things.
I think it is a yes or no question.
I'm not aware of anything, but the reason why I'm answering is the tags may be looking at something that I'm not aware of.
What are you doing at your level? You're not aware of that happening at your level? Because we know that on his first day, President Trump directed U.S. Northern Command to revise its unified command plan to add new planning requirements to combat, and I quote, criminal activities. A series of follow-up executive orders continue to redirect DoD priorities to supporting domestic law enforcement, including one in April that tells DoD, and I quote, use national security assets for law and order. In other words, do law enforcement's job. I'd like to enter these executive orders into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Secretary Hegseth, you say you are focused on warfighting and warriors. These are your words. Yet you are diverting untold DoD resources and attention to fundamentally non-military mission of domestic policing. Across the country, we have qualified police officers who are trained for that mission. They know those streets better than the Marines you deploy to Los Angeles, who normally focus on the Indo-Pacific. And you recently approved 700 more troops in 3 other states to do admin and logistics works for ICE. You say all of this is valuable training, but I would much rather have our troops do tough, realistic training relevant to high-end combat. Instead of typing in spreadsheets for ICE, they should be conducting live fire maneuver exercises. Instead of patrolling American neighborhoods and standing in front of federal buildings, they should be rehearsing call for fire missions. We have local police who can stand in front of those federal buildings. And the list of distractions goes on. You are encouraging the DoD workforce to go work for DHS in increasing numbers. You're pulling the military away from facing foreign enemies who literally say things like death to America. And you're putting troops with weapons aimed at Americans. Mr. Secretary, let the military get back to its real job. Stop forcing them to do DHSs. And if you want to be DHS Secretary, maybe you can apply for that job when you're fired from this one due to your incompetence.
What Senator Tammy Duckworth did in this exchange wasn't just a takedown. It was a masterclass in what accountability should look like when leaders fail the people they're supposed to serve. Duckworth isn't speaking as just another lawmaker tossing partisan attacks across the aisle. She's speaking as a combat veteran who sacrificed her own body for this country. That lived experience gives her words weight that cannot be dismissed. When she calls Pete Hegseth's failures staggering, it's not political theater. It's the sober judgment of someone who knows firsthand what happens when leaders make reckless choices. Let's really unpack what she's saying here, because this goes far beyond one heated hearing. Duckworth points to a billion-dollar mission against the Houthis that didn't accomplish its stated goals, didn't restore shipping security, and instead left us with destroyed aircraft, drones lost, and no strategic gain. That's not just a policy mistake. That's the kind of mismanagement that has ripple effects across our national security. Every failed mission drains morale, wastes resources, and signals to adversaries that America's leadership isn't serious or competent. In the world of defense, perception is as powerful as reality. If our enemies think our leaders are incompetent, they will act accordingly, and that makes us all less safe. She also highlights something even more disturbing: Hegseth's alleged habit of sharing classified operational details through unsecured apps, reportedly to brag to his wife. Now, let's pause on that. Classified information is classified for a reason, because mishandling it can put service members directly in harm's way. When leaders treat classified operations like party tricks or chest-thumping fodder, it's not only reckless, it sends a chilling message down the chain of command. If the Secretary of Defense doesn't respect security protocols, why should anyone else? That kind of arrogance is a national security risk in and of itself. And then Duckworth pivots to something bigger: how the military is being misused here at home for political gain. This isn't just about bad missions overseas. It's about deploying troops into American neighborhoods, diverting resources to ICE, and turning our armed forces into props for a political agenda. That's dangerous. The military exists to defend us against foreign threats, not to intimidate Americans in their own communities. Duckworth makes it crystal clear: when our troops are standing guard outside federal buildings or running administrative errands for immigration enforcement instead of training for high-end combat, we are undermining our own readiness. We are making ourselves weaker against the very enemies who wish us harm. And this isn't happening in a vacuum. Duckworth calls out Hegseth for focusing on Confederate base names, as though preserving monuments to traitors is more important than honoring true heroes. Think about that contrast. On one side, you have Confederate generals who literally fought against the United States. On the other, you have men like Mike Novosel, a Medal of Honor recipient who risked his life under enemy fire to save American soldiers. Duckworth's point is simple but devastating. Leaders who glorify traitors dishonor the sacrifices of real heroes. And by insisting that service members would rather cling to Confederate names, Hegseth reveals how deeply out of touch he is with the values the military should stand for. What Duckworth is doing here is drawing a line in the sand. She's asking, what do we want the military to be? A professional fighting force focused on protecting America, or a political tool bent to the will of whoever happens to hold the White House? Because when leaders like Hegseth squander resources, undermine morale, and politicize the military, it doesn't just hurt our readiness. It erodes the very principle of civilian oversight and constitutional duty that underpins our democracy. And here's why her words matter so much. Tammy Duckworth isn't theorizing from the sidelines. She knows what bad leadership costs. She's lived it. She's paid that price in blood. And that's what makes her voice so uniquely powerful in this moment. When she says Hegseth's failures are staggering, she's not talking about headlines or political optics. She's talking about decisions that put lives at risk, waste the sacrifices of those who serve, and leave this country less safe. This exchange is about accountability, but it's also about vision. Do we want a Secretary of Defense who is more concerned with pleasing the president and staging political stunts? Or do we demand someone who understands the gravity of the job, someone who puts the mission and the troops above everything else? Duckworth's fiery critique is a wake-up call to every American. Leadership matters. Incompetence at the top isn't just embarrassing, it's dangerous. So the real question isn't just whether Pete Hegseth failed in this moment. The question is whether we, as a nation, are going to keep tolerating this level of incompetence from those who hold our security in their hands. Duckworth is doing her job by shining a light on it. Now it's on us to pay attention, to share this message, and to demand better. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about partisanship. It's about safety. It's about the lives of service members. It's about whether America will be defended by leaders worthy of the title. And right now, Duckworth is telling us loud and clear, we deserve better. If you agree, make sure you don't just watch and move on. Share this video, keep the conversation alive, and stay engaged, because accountability only works when all of us demand it.